Imagine waking up one day and discovering that the person you loved unconditionally, whom you raised with all your sacrifice and dedication, is plotting to steal everything from you: your house, your money, your own freedom. Emily Turner, an elderly mother of 66 years old, lived this nightmare when her son filed a lawsuit to declare her mentally incapable and take control of all her assets. What she didn't know was that behind this betrayal was an even more sinister plan. Lies spread throughout the neighborhood, bribed neighbors to testify against her, and a gold digger daughter-in-law manipulating every move. But Emily wasn't the fragile and confused old woman they tried to paint her as. And what happened when she decided to fight back is an emotional story of courage, justice, and transformation that'll leave you speechless. What do you think she did to completely turn this game around? How does a mother face the total humiliation of being betrayed by her own ungrateful son? But to understand how Emily transformed the worst moment of her life into her greatest victory, I'm going to tell you how it all began. You know that feeling like the ground is disappearing from under your feet? That's exactly what Emily Turner felt on that gray autumn Tuesday. She was in the kitchen, preparing the apple pie that Ryan had always loved since childhood, when the doorbell rang. A man in a suit delivered a thick envelope, the kind you already know doesn't bring good news. Emily dried her hands on her embroidered apron, the one she got on Mother's Day so many years ago, and opened the document with trembling hands. The words seemed to dance on the page: interdiction proceedings, mental incapacity, asset guardianship. Her heart raced when she saw the names of the petitioners printed there, cold and official: Ryan Turner and Chloe Turner, her son and her daughter-in-law. Emily needed to sit in the living room chair, the same one where she rocked Ryan when he was just a crying baby during lonely late nights. As an elderly mother of 66, widowed for 5 years, she had built a quiet life in that house full of memories. Each room held pieces of her history: the mark on the kitchen door frame where she measured Ryan's height every birthday, the photos on the living room wall showing genuine smiles from times that seemed so distant now. She always believed she had raised an upstanding son, hard-working, grateful for everything she sacrificed to give him a decent education. Never, not in her worst nightmares, did she imagine that this same son could become an ungrateful son, capable of trying to tear her away from her own house, from her own life. Tears began to flow, blurring her vision as she reread the document repeatedly, as if the words could change meaning. The lawsuit alleged that she was confused, forgetful, incapable of managing her own assets and making decisions. Emily looked around her impeccably organized living room, the bills paid on time on the coffee table, the calendar on the wall with all her medical appointments noted in firm, clear handwriting. She paid her bills, took care of the garden, participated in the local library's reading group every Thursday. How could anyone accuse her of incapacity? But what really shattered her inside wasn't the accusation itself, but rather her son's signature at the end of the document, the one she had taught him to make when he was only 6 years old. Emily tried calling Ryan immediately, her trembling fingers dialing the number she knew by heart. He answered on the 3rd ring, his voice too casual for what was happening, as if he had just destroyed his own mother's life, and it was just another ordinary day. "Mom, I was going to call you today," he said, and there was something different in his tone, a coldness she had never heard before. "It's just a formality, you know how it is. You're getting older, and Chloe and I think it's better to take care of your things now, before you make some mistake." Mistake? What mistake could she make after decades managing the house, finances, her entire life on her own? The gold digger daughter-in-law barely appeared on the phone screen during video calls, always with that forced smile and calculating eyes. And now she was behind this total humiliation. That night, Emily couldn't sleep. She lay there staring at the ceiling of the bedroom she shared with her husband for 40 years, feeling the weight of loneliness squeeze her chest like never before. She had saved every penny, worked hard as a teacher for decades, invested in Ryan's future, paid for his entire college so he wouldn't graduate in debt like so many young people. And now he wanted to take everything from her? The house was worth a considerable amount. It was in a valued neighborhood, and Emily had a modest but comfortable savings that guaranteed her independence. Suddenly, everything made sense. The increasingly rare visits, the insistent questions about her finances in recent weeks, the way Chloe looked at the old furniture in the living room as if she were already calculating how much they'd be worth at an auction. The worst of all was the feeling of betrayal burning in her chest like acid. Emily had always been that present mother who attended all the soccer games, who made favorite treats without being asked, who saved money for years to put a down payment on Ryan's first car. She gave up trips, new clothes, small luxuries, all to ensure her son had better opportunities than she did. And this was the result? A cold, bureaucratic lawsuit trying to label her as a senile old woman who no longer knew how to take care of herself. The true story unfolding before her seemed like a nightmare from which she couldn't wake up. An emotional story, except in real life the pain was much sharper than any movie. Emily picked up the envelope again, her hands still shaking, and read the names of the lawyers representing Ryan and Chloe. They were from an expensive downtown firm, the kind of lawyers who don't come cheap. How were they paying for this? Ryan had mentioned a few times in recent months that his business wasn't doing well, that the consulting company was losing clients. But she didn't imagine the situation was so serious that he'd resort to this. Or was this always the plan? Maybe Chloe had planted this idea in his head, whispering poison in his ears for months, transforming the loving son she knew into a stranger capable of committing such cruelty against his own mother. As the night wore on, and the silent house amplified every tormenting thought, Emily made a decision. She wasn't a helpless victim. She wasn't the confused old woman they were trying to paint on paper. She had a sharp mind, excellent memory, and decades of experience teaching difficult teenagers. If she could handle classrooms full of hormones and rebellion, she could handle this too. Emily got up from bed, turned on the lamplight, and began searching online for lawyers specializing in family law and elder protection. She didn't know exactly how yet, but she was going to fight. The ungrateful son and gold-digger daughter-in-law had no idea who they were messing with, because Emily Turner hadn't gone through everything in life to be discarded like old furniture. Deep down, a hint of hope stubbornly whispered that maybe there was a misunderstanding, that Ryan would show up at the door apologizing, saying it was all a terrible mistake. But the silence of the phone in the following hours, the absence of any message explaining or apologizing, kept confirming what Emily didn't want to believe. This was real, calculated, deliberate. Her son was really trying to take everything from her, and she needed to be ready for what was coming, because something told her this was just the first battle of a war she didn't even know was about to begin. The days following receipt of the lawsuit were the strangest of Emily's life. She began to notice things that previously went unnoticed, small details that now gained a sinister and disturbing meaning. The neighbor ladies, who always greeted her on the sidewalk, suddenly averted their eyes when she passed, hurrying their pace as if she were contagious. Mr. Phillips, who lived 3 houses down and always stopped to comment on her garden, now crossed the street when he saw her approaching. Emily felt a chill down her spine when she realized something was happening behind her back, a silent conspiracy spreading through the neighborhood like wildfire. She wasn't paranoid, she was sure of that, but the feeling of being watched and judged haunted her at every step. It was at the corner bakery on that rainy Thursday that Emily first heard the whispers. She was choosing bread when 2 women behind her started talking in low volume, but not low enough. "Poor Ryan. It must be so difficult dealing with a mother like that," said one of them with that tone of false compassion that makes your blood boil. "I heard she forgets the stove on, leaves faucets running, even went out in her nightgown the other day not knowing where she was." Emily turned sharply, facing the 2 women who went pale when they realized she had heard everything. "Excuse me, but I think you're talking about me, and I'd really like to know who spread these absurd lies," she said, her voice firm despite her trembling hands. The women left quickly, murmuring empty apologies, but the damage was done. Emily returned home with a mixture of anger and fear bubbling inside her. Ryan and Chloe weren't just filing a lawsuit. They were preparing the ground, building a narrative, painting a portrait of her as a senile and dangerous elderly mother. What kind of son would do this? What kind of person would destroy their own mother's reputation in the community where she'd lived for over 30 years. She remembered all the times she defended Ryan at school when he got into trouble, how she fought so he wouldn't be expelled when he cheated on an important test. And now he had no scruples about destroying her publicly, turning her into an object of pity and gossip in the neighborhood she helped build, where she planted trees, organized community parties, and knew every family by name. But not everything was lost. On Friday afternoon, when Emily was in the garden trying to find some comfort tending to the roses she loved so much, Mrs. Parker appeared at the fence that divided their backyards. Margaret Parker was a 72-year-old lady, also a widow, with whom Emily had tea every Tuesday since moving to that house. "Emily, dear, we need to talk," said Mrs. Parker with urgency in her voice, looking around as if she feared being heard. She entered Emily's backyard, and the two sat on the wooden bench under the cherry tree. "You need to know what's happening. Your son and that gold-digger daughter-in-law of his are visiting the neighbors, one by one, asking them to testify against you in the lawsuit. And it's not just that, Emily, they're offering money." Emily felt her stomach turn. "Money? They're bribing people to lie about me." Mrs. Parker nodded gravely, pulling a folded paper from her coat pocket. "Yesterday they showed up at my door. Ryan had that hangdog look, but it was Chloe who did all the talking. She said you were mentally declining, that it was dangerous for you to live alone, that I could help by being a good neighbor and testifying in court." Mrs. Parker unfolded the paper, showing a blank check already signed by Chloe. "She said I could fill in whatever amount I thought was fair for my help. When I said I wouldn't do it, that you're the most lucid and capable person I know, she completely changed, became cold, threatening. She said I should think it over, because elderly people can also have memory problems, and it would be a shame if someone questioned my own capacity." The emotional story Emily was living was taking on increasingly darker contours. She wasn't just facing a lawsuit, she was dealing with an elaborate conspiracy, with systematic manipulation and even veiled threats. The ungrateful son she raised had transformed into someone unrecognizable, or perhaps he had always been like this, and she simply refused to see it. Chloe was clearly the mastermind behind all of this, that woman who appeared in Ryan's life 3 years ago, all forced smiles and kindnesses, but with eyes always calculating, always measuring, always looking for profit in every situation. Emily remembered how uncomfortable she felt at their marriage. Something in the way Chloe looked at the house, asking questions about values, inheritances, life insurance, things a bride on her wedding day shouldn't be thinking about. Mrs. Parker squeezed Emily's hand tightly. "You're not alone in this, dear. I'll testify on your behalf if necessary, and I'll tell exactly what they tried to do to me. But Emily, you need a good lawyer, someone who understands this is much bigger than a simple interdiction case. They're committing crimes, bribery, defamation, attempted fraud. This could even lead to jail if proven." Mrs. Parker's words lit a flame of hope in Emily's chest, but also a deep fear. If Ryan and Chloe were willing to go this far, to bribe neighbors and spread lies, what else were they planning? What other traps were they preparing to ensure she lost everything? That night, Emily didn't sleep again. She sat in the dark living room, only the moonlight coming through the window, thinking about every recent interaction with Ryan and Chloe. How many of their visits in recent months were really to see her, and how many were to collect evidence against her? She remembered one day, about 2 months ago, when she came home and found Ryan alone in the living room, going through papers on her desk. He said he was just looking for an old photo, but now Emily wondered if he was photographing documents, copying banking information, building the dossier they would use against her. The total humiliation of discovering that her own son spied on her, violated her privacy, planned her destruction while she prepared his favorite dinner in the kitchen, was almost unbearable. But Emily Turner wasn't the type who gives up easily. She had survived her parents' premature death, raised a son alone after her husband died, faced prejudice at work for being an older woman in a school full of young teachers. If there was one thing life taught her, it was to fight, even when it seemed there were no more forces. She picked up the phone and began making a list. Neighbors she trusted, possible witnesses, documents she needed to gather, evidence she needed to collect. If Ryan and Chloe wanted war, they'd have war. But they had no idea that this elderly mother they tried to paint as fragile and confused had much more strength than they imagined, and was about to show that messing with Emily Turner was the biggest mistake of their lives. Emily spent the weekend researching lawyers specializing in family law and elder protection. Every website she visited, every review she read, increased her determination to find someone who really understood the gravity of what was happening. It wasn't just an interdiction case. It was a systematic attack on her dignity, her identity, her very existence as a capable and independent person. On Monday morning, she found the name of David Miller, a lawyer with a solid reputation in defending victims of family financial abuse. His reviews were impressive. Saved my mother from being exploited by her own children, exposed a manipulation scheme that lasted years, fought for my grandmother's dignity when no one else believed in her. Emily felt something she hadn't felt in days: hope. David's office was downtown, in a modest but well-kept building. Emily arrived half an hour before the scheduled time, nervous, holding a folder full of documents she had obsessively organized in recent days. The receptionist, a young woman with a kind smile, offered her coffee and said that Dr. Miller wouldn't be long. When he finally appeared, Emily was surprised. She expected an older, imposing man, but David Miller was in his mid-40s, hair beginning to gray, tired but kind eyes, and a firm handshake that conveyed confidence. "Mrs. Turner, welcome. Let's talk calmly about all this," he said, guiding her to his office filled with law books and family photos, an environment that paradoxically dealt with so many destroyed families. Emily told everything. The words came out in a torrent, mixed with tears she tried to contain, but that escaped anyway. She talked about the unexpected lawsuit, about the lies spread in the neighborhood, about the bribery attempt that Mrs. Parker witnessed, about the devastating feeling of being betrayed by her own son. David listened to everything in silence, taking occasional notes without interrupting her, allowing her to vent years of pain concentrated in days of nightmare. When Emily finally finished, emotionally exhausted, David leaned forward and said something that changed everything. "Mrs. Turner, what your son and daughter-in-law are doing isn't just morally reprehensible, it's criminal. And with the right evidence, not only will we win this case, but we can expose them as the fraudsters they really are." David's words lit a flame in Emily's chest. He opened her folder and began examining the documents with a surgeon's attention. "You're organized, that's excellent," he commented, leafing through paid bill receipts, perfectly managed bank statements, calendars with appointments noted in clear and firm handwriting. "This already disproves half of their allegations. A person with mental incapacity doesn't maintain such precise financial records." David explained that they would need updated medical reports, witnesses who could attest to her lucidity, and especially concrete evidence of the manipulation that Ryan and Chloe were orchestrating. "That check your neighbor received is pure gold, Mrs. Turner. Witness bribery is a serious crime. If we can get more evidence like that, we'll turn this game completely around." Emily felt for the first time since that fateful Tuesday that maybe she wasn't fighting a losing battle. David was different. He didn't treat her like a poor thing who needed pity, but as an intelligent and capable client who deserved justice. He explained the process clearly, without complicated legalese, even drawing a timeline so she could understand each step. "The hearing is scheduled for 6 weeks from now. It seems like little time, but it's enough if we work right. I'm going to request an independent psychiatric evaluation for you, done by a renowned professional that the court respects. We'll also collect statements from people who interact with you regularly and can attest to your mental capacity. And Mrs. Turner," he paused, looking directly into her eyes, "I need you to start documenting everything. Any contact with your son or daughter-in-law, record if possible. Write it down if you can't. They're going to try something else. They always do." The mention of recording conversations initially made Emily uncomfortable. It seemed sneaky, even dishonest. But David was gentle in explaining. "I know it seems wrong, but you're defending yourself against people who have already lied about you, tried to bribe neighbors, and are trying to steal your autonomy. This isn't about being dishonest. It's about protecting your truth. The true story of what's happening needs to be documented, because in court, it's your word against theirs." and the more concrete evidence we have, the better. Emily agreed, realizing she needed to be smart, strategic. The ungrateful son and gold-digger daughter-in-law had started this game, but she would learn the rules and play better than them. The total humiliation they tried to impose on her would become their own defeat. Before Emily left the office, David placed his hand on her shoulder, a paternal gesture that reminded her of her own father, dead for so many years. "Mrs. Turner, I know this is painful. Fighting against a son is one of the worst things someone can do, but I want you to understand something important. You're not destroying your family. It was already destroyed by choices your son made. You're just defending yourself, protecting your dignity and your rights. And I'm sure we're going to win this." His words brought tears to Emily's eyes again, but they were different tears now, mixed with determination and a righteous anger. She was no longer just a frightened victim. She was a fighter with a powerful ally at her side, and this emotional story was far from over. Emily left David's office with her head held high for the first time in days. The sun was shining bright that afternoon, and she decided to walk instead of taking a taxi. She needed to feel the fresh air, process everything she had just discovered. People passed by her on the sidewalk, each one immersed in their own dramas and joys, having no idea that this 66-year-old lady with a brown purse and comfortable shoes was about to fight one of the most important battles of her life. Emily stopped in front of a store window, seeing her reflection. It was still her, Emily Turner, retired teacher, dedicated mother, dignified widow. Ryan and Chloe hadn't taken that from her, and they wouldn't. When she got home, Emily went straight to the office she set up in the guest room years ago. She turned on the computer, opened a new document, and began writing everything she could remember. Dates, conversations, strange visits, suspicious questions about money, moments when she caught Ryan going through her things. Each memory was a piece of the puzzle, and she was determined to put together the complete picture. David was right. They would try something else. And when they did, Emily would be ready. For the first time since receiving that envelope, she didn't feel helpless. She had a plan. She had an excellent lawyer. She had witnesses willing to speak the truth. And most importantly, she had absolute certainty that she was on the right side of this story. And that made all the difference when the night got long and fear tried to crawl back into her heart. The weeks passed in a kind of tense fog. Emily followed all of David's instructions religiously. She did the psychiatric evaluation, which confirmed her full mental and emotional capacity, collected letters of recommendation from friends, from the family doctor, even from the librarian who saw her every week. Each document was armor against the lies that Ryan and Chloe tried to spread. The hearing was scheduled for the following Friday, and Emily felt a strange mixture of terror and determination growing inside her with each passing day. Then on Tuesday night, 3 days before court, the doorbell rang. Emily looked through the peephole and her heart raced. It was Ryan, but he wasn't alone. Next to him was Pastor Jenkins, leader of the church she had attended for 15 years. Emily opened the door slowly, confused by this unexpected visit. "Mom," Ryan said, and his voice was different, softer, almost broken. His eyes were red, as if he had been crying, and he wore that blue shirt she gave him as a gift last Christmas, a detail that couldn't be a coincidence. Pastor Jenkins smiled gently, that reassuring smile he used when visiting the sick, and said, "Emily, dear, Ryan came to me asking for help. He's sorry and would like to talk to you if you allow me to be present as a mediator of this reconciliation." The word reconciliation echoed in Emily's head strangely, but she let them in, leading them to the living room where so many family conversations had happened in happier times. Ryan sat on the sofa, the same one where they watched movies together when he was a child, and buried his face in his hands. "Mom, I ruined everything. I ruined everything, and I don't even know how to ask for forgiveness," he began, his voice choked. Emily remained standing, arms crossed, observing that performance with a mixture of desperate desire to believe and a sharp distrust that David had planted in her mind. Ryan told an elaborate story about how Chloe manipulated him, about how their company was bankrupt, about how he panicked and made the biggest mistake of his life. I never wanted to hurt you, Mom. You're all I have. Chloe convinced me it was for your own good, that you needed help, and I was an idiot for believing it." Tears ran down his face. Genuine or not, Emily couldn't be sure. Pastor Jenkins intervened with his calm pastoral voice. "Emily, I've known you for many years, and I've known Ryan since he was a little boy in the church choir. Families go through crises, make mistakes, but forgiveness is God's way. Ryan came to me in confession, repentant, wanting to make peace before this situation destroys you both completely." The pastor's words touched a sensitive chord in Emily. After all, she had always been a woman of faith, raised Ryan in the church's teachings, taught him about compassion and forgiveness. But there was something bothering her, a little voice in the back of her mind, whispering that this was too calculated, too convenient, too performative. Still, it was her son there, crying, asking for forgiveness, and what mother can completely resist that? Emily sat in the armchair facing the sofa, her hands trembling slightly. "Ryan, you filed a lawsuit to declare me mentally incapable. You spread lies about me throughout the entire neighborhood. You tried to bribe my neighbors to testify against me. How can I just forget this?" Her voice came out firmer than expected, loaded with a deep pain she couldn't hide. Ryan stood up, approached, and knelt in front of her, holding her hands like he did when he was a child, and apologized for some mischief. "Mom, I'm going to withdraw the lawsuit. I'm going to fix this. I just need you to forgive me, to give me a chance to prove I'm still your son, that I still love you." For a moment, Emily almost gave in. She almost believed that this was really the Ryan she knew, repentant and vulnerable. But then came the turn. Emily, with a trembling but still controlled voice, asked, "If you're really sorry, Ryan, withdraw the lawsuit tomorrow morning. Go to court with your lawyer and formalize the dismissal. Then we'll talk about forgiveness and rebuilding." Ryan's face changed subtly, a shadow passing through his eyes. "Mom, it's not that simple. There are legal issues. The lawyer said we can't just drop it now. There would be costs, complications." Emily felt her heart sink. There was the truth. He didn't really want to give up. He wanted her to give up defending herself. Pastor Jenkins tried to mediate. "Emily, maybe you can reach an agreement, something that benefits both of you, that avoids the strain of court." But Emily had heard enough. The ungrateful son wasn't sorry. He was just trying a new tactic. Emily stood up, moving away from Ryan with a firmness that surprised even herself. "Ryan, you came here with a pastor, used tears, used memories of our life together, but you're not willing to do the only thing that would prove your repentance. Withdraw the lawsuit you yourself initiated. That tells me everything I need to know." Ryan tried to argue. Pastor Jenkins tried to calm the situation. But Emily was transformed. She was no longer the frightened and confused elderly mother they expected to find. She was a woman who finally saw the truth with crystal clarity. This was theater, emotional manipulation, a last desperate attempt to make her lower her guard before the hearing. The gold-digger daughter-in-law was probably waiting in the car, rehearsing with Ryan every word, every gesture, every calculated tear. "You need to leave now," Emily said, opening the front door. Ryan stood up from the floor, and for the first time that night, the mask fell completely. His eyes became cold, hard. "You're going to regret this, Mom. In court, they'll see who you really are. A stubborn and paranoid old woman who pushed away her own son." The words cut like knives, but Emily didn't tremble. She had her cell phone in her pocket, recording every second of that conversation as David had instructed. Ryan and Pastor Jenkins left, and Emily locked the door behind them, leaning against the solid wood as she tried to control her breathing. The total humiliation they tried to impose didn't work. She saw through the farce, and now she had one more proof of the systematic manipulation she was facing. Emily Turner was no longer a victim. She was a warrior, and the war was just beginning to get interesting. That night, Emily didn't feel sadness. She felt something new, powerful, an iron determination to fight to the end. She sent the recording to David by email, with steady hands and a resolute heart. The emotional story of her life had just gained a new chapter, and this time, she was writing the script, not just suffering the consequences of others' choices. The hearing was 3 days away, and Emily was more ready than ever to face her son in court and show him that messing with her was the biggest mistake he'd ever made. and that every fake tear, every manipulative word, every attempt to destroy her would be returned with the force of truth and justice. Friday dawned with a gray and heavy sky, as if even the weather knew the importance of that day. Emily woke up at 5 in the morning, after a night of sleep fragmented by nightmares and anxiety. She lay there staring at the ceiling for a few minutes, breathing deeply, remembering everything David had said. You're capable, you're strong, and the truth is on your side. She got up, took a long shower, letting the hot water relieve the tension in her shoulders, and opened the closet. There it was, the navy blue dress she had bought 8 years ago for Ryan's college graduation. Emily had kept that dress with so much care, a memory of one of the happiest days of her life when she watched her son receive the diploma she helped pay for with years of sacrifice. Now wearing that same dress to face him in court had a cruel irony that didn't go unnoticed. David arrived at 8 o'clock sharp to pick her up, punctual as always. He drove in respectful silence for the first few minutes until he finally said, "Mrs. Turner, you're prepared. Remember, be yourself, answer honestly, and don't let them see you waver. The judge is known for being fair, doesn't tolerate manipulation, and we have solid evidence." Emily nodded, clutching her purse on her lap as if it were an anchor. Inside were documents, blood pressure medication in case she needed it, and an old photo of young Ryan smiling in her arms, something she brought without even knowing exactly why, perhaps to remind herself that this man trying to destroy her was once that baby she loved unconditionally, before greed and the influence of a gold-digger daughter-in-law transformed him into an ungrateful son. The courthouse was an imposing building downtown, with white columns and a staircase that seemed endless. Emily climbed each step, feeling the weight of all the looks she imagined on her. Inside, the hallway was full of lawyers, families, people waiting for their own hearings, each one carrying their own stories of pain and injustice. When Emily entered the courtroom, her heart almost stopped. Ryan and Chloe were already there, seated on the other side with their lawyer, a man in an expensive suit with an arrogant expression. Ryan looked at her for a moment, and Emily searched for some sign of remorse, some hesitation, but found only coldness. Chloe didn't even bother looking, busy on her phone with that studied boredom expression she used for everything. The judge entered, a man in his 60s with gray hair and reading glasses hanging on his neck. "Good morning, everyone. We're here for interdiction case number 2024-5782, Ryan Turner versus Emily Turner." Hearing her own name and her son's name placed on opposite sides of a versus was like receiving a punch to the stomach. Ryan's lawyer began his argument, painting Emily as a woman in mental decline, forgetful, incapable of taking care of herself or her assets. He called the first witness, a neighbor Emily barely knew, a woman who lived several houses away and who swore she had seen Emily confused and disoriented on the street several times. It was a blatant lie, and Emily felt the total humiliation burn her face as she listened to this unknown woman destroy her reputation for money. More witnesses were called, each one telling stories that Emily knew were false or grotesquely exaggerated. A supposed supermarket employee claimed she always forgot where she parked her car. A neighbor said he saw her leaving the garden hose running for hours. Each lie was a stab, but David remained calm beside her, writing everything down, waiting for his turn. When it was finally the defense's turn, David stood up with a presence that dominated the room. "Your Honor, the defense would like to present evidence that not only proves Mrs. Turner's full mental capacity, but also exposes a systematic attempt at fraud by the petitioners." The word fraud echoed in the room, and Emily saw Ryan stiffen in his chair. Chloe finally put down her phone, eyes wide. David began methodically. First, he presented the complete psychiatric report, done by one of the city's most respected professionals, attesting that Emily had perfect mental health, excellent memory, and full capacity to make decisions. Then he called Mrs. Parker as a witness, who recounted in detail the bribery attempt, even showing the blank check that Chloe had left. The judge leaned forward, clearly interested. David then presented Emily's bank statements, perfectly organized, bills paid on time, well-managed investments. "This isn't an incapable woman, Your Honor. This is a woman being systematically defamed by relatives who want access to her assets. The true story was finally being told, without filters, without manipulation, just the naked truth exposed under the fluorescent lights of the courthouse. But the best was yet to come. David connected a laptop to the room's projection system. Your Honor, I'd like to present recordings that demonstrate the true nature of this case. The first recording was from Ryan's visit with the pastor, that pathetic attempt at emotional manipulation 3 days earlier. Ryan's voice echoed in the courtroom. Mom, it's not that simple. There are legal issues. We can't just drop it now. The judge frowned, taking off his glasses and cleaning them slowly. Emily saw Ryan go pale. Chloe whispered something urgent to their lawyer. But David wasn't finished. He played a second recording. This one even more devastating, that Mrs. Parker had secretly made during the bribery attempt. Chloe's voice was clear, cold, calculating. You can fill in whatever amount you think is fair for your help. We all know Emily is declining. We just need the court to see it too. The silence in the room was deafening. The judge looked directly at Ryan and Chloe, and Emily saw genuine fear in her son's eyes for the first time. It wasn't fear of losing the case. It was fear of something much bigger. Real criminal consequences. Their lawyer tried to recover, claiming the recordings were taken out of context, that there were misunderstandings, but his words sounded weak and desperate even to him. David ended his argument with a phrase that would be etched in Emily's memory forever. Your Honor, what we have here isn't a concerned son trying to protect a vulnerable mother. What we have is a calculated attempt at fraud, defamation, and financial abuse against a perfectly capable woman. And I request that this case be dismissed immediately and referred for criminal investigation. Emily's emotional story was reaching its climax, and for the first time in weeks, she felt that maybe, just maybe, justice really existed. The judge banged the gavel, calling for a 30-minute recess to analyze the evidence. Emily left the room with David, her legs shaky, her heart racing. They sat on a bench in the hallway, and David offered her water. You were amazing in there, Mrs. Turner. You kept your composure, even hearing all those lies. Now we just wait. But I'm confident. Emily looked back and saw Ryan leaving the room, Chloe clutching his arm, the lawyer speaking urgently in a low tone. For a moment, Emily's gaze crossed with Ryan's, and she saw something she didn't expect. Not just fear, but shame. A deep shame that perhaps indicated there was still some spark of humanity there, buried under layers of greed and desperation, and that, strangely enough, made her even sadder than everything that had happened up to that moment. The 30-minute recess felt like 30 hours. Emily sat on that hard hallway bench, watching people pass by, each absorbed in their own legal dramas. She tried not to look in the direction where Ryan and Chloe were, but it was impossible not to notice the tense atmosphere between them. Chloe gestured frantically, clearly furious, while Ryan remained with his head down, defeated. Their lawyer was on the phone, his tone of voice increasingly agitated. Emily wondered if they were finally realizing the gravity of the situation they'd gotten themselves into, if they understood they had crossed a line from which there was no return. David, beside her, reviewed his notes with the calm of someone who knew he had done an excellent job, but Emily could see the tension in his shoulders, the way he gripped the pen too tightly. When the official finally called everyone back to the room, Emily felt a stomach turn. The judge entered with a grave expression that revealed nothing, sat down, and organized the papers in front of him with deliberate, slow movements. The silence in the room was absolute, the kind of heavy silence that precedes great revelations. Before giving my decision, the judge began, taking off his glasses and looking directly at Ryan and Chloe. I'd like to ask Dr. Miller if he has any more evidence to present. The recordings we heard are serious, but accusations of fraud require substantial proof. Emily felt her heart sink momentarily. Weren't the recordings enough? Would everything still not be enough to prove the conspiracy against her? David stood up, and there was something different in his posture now, an almost dangerous confidence. Yes, Your Honor. I saved the most compelling evidence for this moment. He signaled to his assistant, who brought another laptop. During the past few weeks, Mrs. Turner noticed suspicious behaviors from her son and daughter-in-law when they visited her house. Following my guidance, She installed discreet security cameras in her residence. Emily saw Ryan lift his head abruptly, panic evident in his eyes. Chloe went white as paper. Their lawyer began to protest, but the judge raised his hand, silencing him. "Continue, Dr. Miller." Emily didn't even know David had planned to reveal this that way, as the final blow, the ace up the sleeve that would completely transform the game. The screen lit up, showing Emily's living room, filmed from a discreet angle. The date and time in the corner indicated it was from 2 weeks ago. In the recording, Ryan and Chloe entered the house when Emily had supposedly gone out to the market. "We need to be quick," Chloe's voice echoed in the courtroom, clear as crystal. Ryan began photographing documents on Emily's desk with his phone, while Chloe opened drawers and cabinets. "When we win this case and have control of our assets, the first thing we do is sell this house," Chloe said, running her hand over the furniture as if she already owned them. "It should be worth easily $800,000, maybe even $1 million if we renovate first. Then we liquidate the investments, pay our debts, and there's still good money left." The total humiliation Emily felt watching her son and daughter-in-law planning her financial destruction in her own house was almost unbearable. But the recording continued, and it got even worse. Ryan appeared with a box of his mother's medicine. "She takes this for blood pressure. The lawyer said if we can prove she forgets to take her medications, it reinforces our case of incapacity." Chloe smiled, that cold and calculating smile that was now being displayed for the entire courtroom to see. "Great. And those witnesses we bribed will confirm they saw her confused on the street. With the pastor validating that she rejected reconciliation, the narrative of a stubborn and mentally unstable old woman is perfect." The word bribed echoed in the room, and Emily saw the judge press his lips into a thin line of contained anger. Ryan's lawyer tried to stand up but seemed to have forgotten how to speak, his mouth opening and closing without sound. David paused the video. "Your Honor, this recording was made legally within Mrs. Turner's private residence, where she has every right to install security systems. What we see here isn't just evidence that Mrs. Turner is perfectly capable and was right to be suspicious, but also explicit confession of conspiracy to commit fraud, witness bribery, and manipulation of the judicial system." There were more recordings, David explained, from other occasions when Ryan and Chloe openly discussed how they would spend Emily's money after finally getting rid of her, as Chloe had said in one of the recordings. Each new revelation was like a bomb exploding in the room, and Emily watched everything with a mixture of vindication and deep sadness. She was being proven innocent, but at what cost? Seeing the extent of her son's betrayal being exposed like that was a bitter victory. The judge finally spoke, and his voice was loaded with a cold authority that made everyone in the room straighten up. "In all my years in court, I've rarely seen such a flagrant and well-documented attempt to manipulate the judicial system." He looked directly at Ryan and Chloe, who looked like they wanted to disappear into their chairs. "The interdiction request is denied immediately. Mrs. Emily Turner is declared fully capable mentally and physically to manage her assets and her life. In addition, I'm ordering that copies of all the evidence presented today be forwarded to the Public Prosecutor's Office for Criminal Investigation for procedural fraud, witness bribery, and attempted misappropriation through fraud." The gavel struck forcefully, echoing in the room like thunder. Emily's true story had just gained an ending she barely dared to hope for: complete justice, total validation, and real consequences for those who tried to destroy her. Emily felt tears run down her face, but they were tears of relief, of exhaustion, of a complex mixture of emotions she couldn't even name. David gently squeezed her shoulder. "It's over, Mrs. Turner. You won." On the other side of the room, Ryan's lawyer was frantically packing his papers, clearly wanting to get out of there as quickly as possible. Chloe had already run out, abandoning Ryan there, and for the first time, Emily saw something that looked like genuine remorse on her son's face. He looked at her across the room, his eyes red, and Emily saw in that moment the boy he had been, the son she loved before greed and the influence of a gold-digger daughter-in-law corrupted him completely. But it was too late for regrets, too late for empty apologies. The ungrateful son had made his choices, and now he would have to live with the consequences of them. When Emily left the courthouse with David, the sun had finally broken through the gray clouds of the morning. The bright light blinded her for a moment, and she stopped at the top of the staircase, breathing deeply the fresh air of freedom. She was free. She was vindicated. She was, for the first time in months, at peace with herself. People passed by her, going up and down the steps, each one carrying their own battles, having no idea that this 66-year-old woman in a navy blue dress had just won one of the most difficult wars anyone can fight, the war against one's own family. David stood beside her in respectful silence, understanding that she needed that moment, that pause, to process everything that had happened, to feel the weight of the victory that was at the same time so sweet and so devastatingly sad, because victories like this always come with losses that no court verdict can completely repair. Emily sat on the bench in the square in front of the courthouse, unable to move for a few minutes. David had gone to get the car, saying she deserved a moment of tranquility before returning home. People passed by hurriedly, immersed in their Friday routines, completely oblivious to the emotional earthquake that had just happened inside that imposing building. Emily looked at her own hands, still trembling slightly, and tried to process what it meant to have won. She had proven her sanity, exposed the conspiracy, guaranteed her freedom and her assets. The judge had been categorical, the evidence irrefutable, justice served in its purest form. So why did she feel so empty? Why did victory taste so bitter in her mouth, like medicine swallowed without water? The truth was too painful to ignore. She had won the case, but lost her son. Not in the literal sense. Ryan was still alive, breathing, existing somewhere in the world. But the son she knew, the boy who built sand castles on the beach, the teenager who hugged her after soccer games, the young adult who cried with joy when he graduated from college, that son had died. Or perhaps he never really existed, and that was the part that hurt most. Emily wondered now if she had been blind all these years, if the signs had always been there, and she simply refused to see them, because it was easier to believe in the illusion of a perfect family. The emotional story she imagined living with Ryan was, in fact, a carefully constructed lie that collapsed spectacularly before a judge and a room full of strangers. David returned and sat beside her, in no hurry, respecting her silence. Finally, Emily spoke, her voice low and tired. "I should be happy. I won. Why can't I feel joy?" David sighed, and there was a knowing sadness in his eyes. The sadness of someone who had seen this scenario repeat many times. Because victories like this aren't really victories, Mrs. Turner. They're survivals. You survived a destruction attempt orchestrated by the person who should protect you above all else. You saved your freedom, your dignity, your assets, but you lost something that no money can buy. The illusion that your family was what you thought it was. His words were harsh, but true, and Emily felt new tears flow, different from those she cried in court. These were tears of mourning, of irreparable loss. The walk to the car seemed longer than it really was. Emily felt her body heavy, as if she had aged 10 years in those few hours of hearing. During the drive back home, she looked out the window without really seeing the city passing by. The stores decorated for autumn, people on the sidewalks smiling and talking, children playing in the park. Everything seemed to belong to a different world from hers. How did people manage to live their normal lives while someone's world was falling apart? Emily knew it was selfish to think like this, that each person had their own invisible battles, but she couldn't help the feeling of being disconnected from everything and everyone. The elderly mother who had been so strong in court now felt fragile like cracked porcelain, holding herself together only by sheer willpower. When they arrived at her house, Emily sat in the car for a moment before getting out. That house, where she had lived so many years, raised her son, built memories, now seemed contaminated. Each room held not only happy moments, but also the memory of Ryan and Chloe conspiring, photographing documents, planning how to steal everything from her. The garden she loved so much had been the stage for false conversations. The living room where they watched movies together had been the setting for the last pathetic manipulation attempt with the pastor. How could she continue living there, surrounded by ghosts of betrayals? David seemed to read her thoughts. "Mrs. Turner, I know right now everything seems too heavy, but with time things will settle. You'll find a new normal even if it's different from what you had before." But Emily wasn't so sure. She entered the house and went straight to the bedroom, taking off that blue dress that carried so much meaning. Ryan's graduation dress, now transformed into Ryan's betrayal dress. She folded it carefully, knowing she would never wear it again, but unable to simply throw it away. She put on comfortable clothes, made tea, and sat on the back porch, watching the garden she had worked so hard to cultivate. The roses were beginning to wither with autumn's arrival, their petals falling one by one, and Emily painfully identified with them. She too was in the autumn of life, and parts of her were falling, dying, transforming into something different. The ungrateful son had taken not only her peace, but also her ability to fully trust anyone again. David had called earlier, offering to sue them for moral damages, for defamation, for everything they had done. He said they had a strong case, that Emily could not only recover legal costs, but also receive significant compensation for the suffering caused. But Emily gently refused. "I don't want any more of this, David. I don't want more money from him. I don't want more time spent thinking about him. I don't want to perpetuate this war. I just want peace." David had respected her decision, but added something important. "Then focus on rebuilding, Mrs. Turner. You have a second chance to live the life you want, not the life you think you should want. Use it. Don't let him steal anything more from you, not one more day of your happiness." The total humiliation she felt had transformed into something different now, a quiet determination to recover not what she lost, but what she never had the chance to have. That night, Emily did something she hadn't done in years. She opened a bottle of wine she'd been saving for special occasions and drank a glass alone on the porch, under the stars. It wasn't exactly a celebration, but it wasn't defeat either. It was an acknowledgement that she had survived, that she was standing when she could be destroyed. She thought about all the women going through similar situations, mothers being exploited by children, wives betrayed by husbands, elderly women being disrespected and discarded by families who only saw in them the monetary value they could extract. How many of these women didn't have the resources she had? How many didn't have a David Miller to defend them? How many simply gave in, signed papers, lost everything because they were too tired to fight? Emily felt a pang of responsibility, as if her victory wasn't just hers, but carried the weight of all these untold stories. For the first time since that fateful Tuesday when she received the lawsuit, Emily managed to sleep a full night. It wasn't peaceful sleep. It was interrupted by strange and disturbing dreams, but it was sleep nonetheless. When she woke up on Saturday morning, the sun came through the window, illuminating dust dancing in the air, and Emily had a sudden revelation. She didn't need to remain trapped in the past, in memories, in the walls of that house that now suffocated her. She was 66 years old, reasonably healthy, financial resources intact thanks to the victory in court, and for the first time in her life, no one to take care of except herself. It was terrifying and liberating at the same time. The true story of her life was far from over, in fact. Maybe it was just really beginning, and this realization brought the first genuine smile to Emily's face in weeks, a small and hesitant smile, but real nonetheless. 3 months after the hearing, Emily was standing on the house's porch for the last time. The sold sign swayed gently in the winter wind, and she felt a strange mixture of relief and melancholy. It had been a difficult decision, selling the house where she lived for over 30 years, where each room held memories of a lifetime. But David was right when he said she needed a clean restart, without the ghosts of betrayals echoing through the hallways. The new owners were a young couple with 2 small children, and Emily liked to imagine that those walls would once again shelter genuine laughter, true love, memories that wouldn't be stained by greed and betrayal. She picked up the last box, locked the door for the last time, and handed over the keys without looking back. The elderly mother who had entered that house decades ago was no longer the same woman leaving now. The new apartment was downtown, in a modern building with large windows and a view of the park. It was smaller, more practical, and completely different from everything Emily had known. When she entered for the first time with the keys in her hands, she felt a wave of freedom she had never experienced. That space was only hers, with no previous history, no painful memories etched in the walls. She could decorate it exactly as she wanted, without worrying if it matched old furniture or if it respected the house style. Emily hired a young and modern interior designer, something she would never have done before, and together they created a space that reflected who Emily wanted to be, not who she had been forced to be for so many years. Vibrant colors replaced neutral and safe tones. Contemporary art occupied the walls where before there were only family photos. The apartment's transformation was just a reflection of a much larger transformation happening inside her. Emily began doing things she always wanted but never allowed herself. She enrolled in a watercolor painting course on Tuesdays and Thursdays, discovering a talent she didn't know she possessed. Her first attempts were clumsy, color stains without defined form, but gradually she got the hang of it, finding in art a way to express emotions that words couldn't reach. The teacher, a middle-aged Italian woman named Lucia, praised her progress. "Emily, you paint with your heart. That's rare, especially in someone who's starting late. It's never too late to discover who we really are." Lucia's words echoed in Emily for days. Discover who we really are. She had spent her entire life being a daughter, then a wife, then a mother, and had never stopped to ask who Emily was, just Emily. One day, leafing through a magazine in a cafe near the apartment, Emily saw a travel advertisement for the West Coast. The photo showed the Pacific Ocean crashing against dramatic rocks, the sunset painting the sky in impossible oranges and pinks. Emily had never seen the ocean like that, only the Atlantic on a few quick trips years ago. In fact, she had never really traveled. There were always excuses. Work, bills. Ryan needed something. Her husband was busy. But now there were no excuses. Emily closed the magazine, grabbed her phone, and, before she could convince herself otherwise, booked a 2-week package to California. When she confirmed the purchase, she felt butterflies in her stomach that were part fear, part pure excitement. The emotional story of her life was gaining chapters she never imagined writing. The trip to California was transformative in a way Emily couldn't completely explain. When she saw the Pacific Ocean for the first time in Big Sur, the huge waves breaking against the cliffs, she cried. They weren't tears of sadness, but of something bigger, an emotion she couldn't name. It was as if she were seeing, for the first time, how vast the world was, how many possibilities existed beyond the small bubble she had lived in for decades. Emily rented a car and drove along Highway 1, stopping in charming little towns, talking with strangers in cafes, eating in restaurants she would never have entered before. In Carmel, she bought an expensive painting from a local gallery, something the old Emily would have considered extravagant and unnecessary. But the new Emily hung the canvas on the living room wall, a constant reminder that life was too short not to allow herself small luxuries. During the trip, Emily met other women traveling alone and discovered she wasn't as alone as she thought. On a wine tour in Napa Valley, she talked with Margaret, a 70-year-old widow who had sold everything and was living in an RV, traveling around the country. "After my husband died, I realized I'd spent 50 years living the life he wanted, not mine. Now I'm making up for lost time," Margaret said, her eyes shining with contagious vivacity. Emily also met Susan, a 62-year-old divorcee who had left an abusive marriage and was rediscovering herself through solo travel. These women weren't victims lamenting, they were warriors celebrating their newly conquered freedoms. Emily realized she was part of an unofficial club of women who refused to let betrayals and losses define the rest of their lives. When she returned home, Emily was no longer the same person who had left. She had a tan from the California sun, photos on her phone of places she only knew from postcards, and most importantly, a growing certainty that she had made the right choices. Selling the house wasn't abandoning memories, it was freeing herself from a prison. Distancing herself from Ryan wasn't cruelty, it was self-preservation. Rebuilding her life at 66 wasn't too late, it was exactly the right time. Emily unpacked her suitcase, organized the souvenirs she had bought, and sat on the new sofa in her new apartment, looking out the window at the city pulsing below. For the first time in decades, she wasn't waiting for the next disaster, wasn't preparing for the next betrayal. She was simply living, and that was revolutionary. Emily began attending a reading group at the local library, something she had done in the other neighborhood but had abandoned during the chaos of the lawsuit. This new group was different, more diverse, with people of all ages and backgrounds. They debated books intensely, disagreed without malice, laughed together after meetings while having coffee at a nearby bakery. Emily made genuine friendships, not based on decades of forced neighborhood coexistence, but on real shared interests. Mrs. Parker still visited her regularly, making the trip from the suburbs to downtown, and the two developed an even stronger friendship after everything they went through together. "You're different, Emily," Mrs. Parker commented on one of these visits. "Lighter, more yourself. It's beautiful to see." And it was true. Emily had spent so much time being what others needed that she had forgotten who she really was. But now she was discovering, one layer at a time. Gradually, Emily began sharing her story with close people, not with shame or as a request for pity, but as testimony of survival and rebuilding. Some people were shocked, others shared their own stories of family betrayals, and Emily realized that elder abuse by family members was much more common than she imagined. A seed was planted in her mind during these conversations, an idea that started small but kept growing. What if she could use her experience to help other women in similar situations? What if the total humiliation she suffered could be transformed into something bigger, something that made a difference in other people's lives? Emily didn't yet know exactly how she would do this, but the idea excited her in a way she hadn't felt in years. Maybe the purpose she searched for her entire life wasn't to be the perfect mother or the dedicated wife, but to be the voice for those who had been silenced by families that should protect them. And this possibility made her heart race with a mixture of fear and anticipation that made her feel more alive than she had in decades. A full year had passed since the hearing when Emily's phone rang with a number she recognized immediately, even though she had deleted it from her contacts months ago. It was Ryan. She stared at the screen vibrating on the coffee table for several rings, her heart racing, her mind running with 1,000 possibilities. Part of her wanted to let it go to voicemail, maintain the peace she had so carefully built. But another part, that maternal part that never completely dies, no matter how much pain a son causes, needed to know. On the last ring before falling to voicemail, Emily answered. "Hello?" Her voice came out firmer than expected. On the other side, there was silence for a moment, then Ryan's voice, hoarse as if he had been crying or shouting, or both. "Mom, is it you? I wasn't sure you'd answer." Emily said nothing, waiting. She had learned during that year that silence is also an answer, sometimes the most powerful one. Ryan continued, words coming out in a rushed torrent. "I know I have no right to call. I know I ruined everything in a way that can't be fixed. But I need to talk to you, in person, if you'll let me. I'm not asking for forgiveness because I know I don't deserve it. I just need you to know some things." Emily looked out the apartment window, at the park trees swaying with the spring wind. A year ago she would have given in immediately, would have run to hug him, would have believed any excuse. But the Emily of now was different, wiser, more cautious. "Where do you want to meet?" she asked finally, surprising even herself by agreeing. "At the cafe near the Central Park, the one you used to like. Tomorrow at 3? Emily agreed and hung up, staying with the phone in her hand for long minutes after, wondering if she had just made a terrible mistake. The next day, Emily arrived at the cafe 5 minutes late on purpose. She had learned during sessions with the therapist she started seeing a few months ago that small acts of control helped rebalance power dynamics in damaged relationships. Ryan was already there, sitting at a corner table, and Emily almost didn't recognize him. He had lost weight drastically, his face more angular, deep dark circles, his hair grayer than she remembered. He stood up when he saw her, hesitant, as if he didn't know whether he should hug her or keep his distance. Emily made the decision for him, sitting in the opposite chair without offering physical contact. "Thank you for coming, Mom," he said, his voice trembling. Emily just nodded, ordering tea from the waitress, keeping her expression neutral, waiting for him to speak first. The true story of what happened that year was about to be revealed, and Emily prepared herself mentally for whatever came. Ryan started slowly, his eyes fixed on the coffee cup in front of him. "Chloe left me 3 days after the hearing. She took everything that had any value in the apartment and just disappeared. I found out later she had a lover for months, an older businessman with real money. I was just her plan B, and when the plan to get your money failed, she jumped to the next one. Emily listened without visible reaction, but inside she felt a pang of satisfaction she tried not to acknowledge. The gold digger daughter-in-law had shown her true colors, as Emily always knew she would. Ryan continued. The criminal investigation the judge ordered. They went after me for months. In the end, I wasn't arrested because the prosecutors decided I was more a victim of her manipulation than a conscious accomplice. But I lost everything anyway, Mom. My reputation, my clients, my friends. Everyone knows what I tried to do to you. He finally raised his eyes, and Emily saw something there that seemed genuine for the first time. Deep shame, devastating remorse. I wanted you to know that everything that happened, all that madness, started when the company went bankrupt and Chloe started whispering in my ear. She found our financial documents, saw how much you had saved, and planted the idea in my head gradually. At first I resisted, I swear I resisted, but she was convincing and I was desperate, and she manipulated every conversation until it seemed like we were doing this for your own good. Emily took a sip of tea, letting the silence extend before responding. When she finally spoke, her voice was calm but firm. Ryan, you're telling me you tried to rob me, defame me, destroy my reputation and my life because your wife manipulated you. You were 40 years old, not a child. At some point you made conscious choices. Emily's response clearly caught him by surprise. Perhaps he expected her to simply accept the victim narrative he was building. You're right, he said finally, his voice breaking. I made terrible choices. I let greed and desperation transform me into someone unrecognizable. I looked at you, who sacrificed everything for me, and saw only a means to solve my financial problems. I have no excuse for that, Mom. None. He wiped away the tears that began to fall, and Emily felt her heart tighten slightly, that maternal instinct wanting to comfort him. But she remained firm, remembering the sleepless nights, the humiliation she felt, the lies spread. The ungrateful son he had been didn't simply disappear because now he was sorry. Repentance was a beginning, but it wasn't automatic absolution. Emily took a deep breath before speaking. Ryan, I'm going to be very clear with you because you deserve honesty, even though you didn't give me the same courtesy. I don't know if I'll ever be able to completely forgive you for what you did. You didn't just try to steal my money or my house. You tried to steal my identity, my dignity, my ability to live as an autonomous person. You were willing to lock me in a legal prison for the rest of my life for your own benefit. Ryan went pale, but Emily continued. But I also understand that people commit terrible mistakes, especially when they're desperate and under the influence of other manipulative people. So I'm going to offer you something, but there are very clear conditions. She leaned forward, looking directly into his eyes. If you want to try to rebuild some kind of relationship with me, it has to be based on absolute respect. No money involved ever again. No borrowing, no expensive gifts you can't afford, no involvement in my finances in any way. Ryan nodded vigorously, clearly willing to accept any terms. I agree, completely. I just want a chance to prove there's still something of the son you raised underneath all the garbage. Emily felt a small crack in the armor she had built around her heart. It wasn't complete forgiveness, not even close, but it was a tiny opening, a possibility that maybe eventually they could have some kind of relationship. Let's go slowly, she said finally. You can call me once a week. We can meet for coffee once a month if the calls go well. But Ryan, at the first lie, at the first manipulation, at the first time you cross any of the boundaries I'm establishing, it's over permanently. I'm not going to give you infinite chances. You'll have one, and what you do with it is your responsibility. Their emotional story hadn't ended completely, but it had changed irrevocably, and they both knew it would never be what it was again. They talked for another hour, not about the past, but about the present. Ryan told her he was working temporary jobs, rebuilding his life from scratch, living in a tiny apartment that barely fit his bed. Emily told him about the trip to California, about the painting classes, about the new apartment, carefully omitting financial details. It was strange, formal, like two polite acquaintances instead of mother and son. but it was a beginning. When they said goodbye on the sidewalk, Ryan hesitated, clearly wanting a hug, but Emily just shook his hand, a cordial but distant gesture. "I'll call you next week, Mom," he said, and she nodded. Emily walked back to the apartment alone, processing the meeting. She didn't feel exactly happy, but she didn't feel devastated either. She felt cautiously hopeful, which was more than she had felt regarding Ryan in a long time. That night, Emily called Mrs. Parker and told her about the meeting. "Do you think I did the right thing giving him a chance?" she asked, a small part of her still doubting the decision. Mrs. Parker was wise as always. "Dear, you're not giving him a chance. You're giving yourself a chance to see if there's a possibility of genuine reconciliation without compromising your safety or your peace. That's not weakness, it's courage. Weakness would be pretending nothing happened. Strength is establishing clear boundaries and staying true to them." Emily smiled, grateful to have that solid friendship. She looked around the apartment that had become her sanctuary, thought about the life she had built in the last year, and knew that no matter what happened with Ryan from then on, she would be okay. She had saved herself. She had rebuilt herself, and now lived on her own terms. If Ryan could respect that and find his way back to some kind of healthy relationship, it would be a bonus. But if he couldn't, Emily knew now that she could survive, even thrive, without him, and that knowledge was liberating in a way she never imagined possible before this painful but transformative journey began. 2 years after the hearing that changed her life, Emily was sitting in a small community auditorium, looking at the 40 chairs occupied by women of various ages who had been victims of financial or emotional abuse by members of their own families. Emily had founded the support group Dignity Reclaimed 6 months ago, using part of the money from selling the old house, and what started as informal meetings had grown to weekly sessions that offered emotional support, legal and psychological guidance. That night, as she looked at those hopeful and wounded faces, Emily felt the weight of responsibility, but also a deep sense of purpose as she shared her story. She told everything without omitting painful details, from that fateful Tuesday to the victory in court, and the women recognized their own pains in every word. Her emotional story wasn't just entertainment, it was a map for other people to find their own paths through darkness, proving it was possible to survive the betrayal of an ungrateful son and a gold-digger daughter-in-law. Emily learned that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting or trusting blindly again, but simply releasing the poison of anger that corrodes you from within without necessarily giving the other person full access to your life again. Her relationship with Ryan continued cautious but stable. He respected the established boundaries, but she had made peace with the fact that it would never be like before, or rather, like she thought it was. Each conversation with the women in the group reinforced the purpose she had found, and her pain hadn't been in vain if it could illuminate the path for other elderly mothers coming out of similar tunnels of family abuse. The total humiliation she felt no longer defined her identity. It was just a part of the journey that transformed her into who she was now, an independent, strong woman at peace with herself. She who 2 years ago was paralyzed with fear now helped other women find their own strengths, and that was worth more than any illusion of a perfect family. The next morning, Emily woke up and went to the park for her morning walk, thinking about how each dawn was a new chance to choose how to live on her own terms. She hadn't lost a son because of money, as she initially thought. She had discovered the truth about who he really was when tested by adversity, and although painful, that truth was liberating. She could live in reality, with all the imperfections and wounds, and still find joy, purpose, and genuine peace she never imagined possible at 66 years old. Emily smiled at people in the park, feeling deep gratitude for being alive, for being free, for finally being who she always should have been. The true story of her life didn't have the fairy tale ending she might have imagined when young, but it had something better: authenticity, transformation, and the certainty that she was the author of her own pages from then on. Emily's story reminds us that it's never too late to start over, that dignity is priceless, and that sometimes the greatest victory isn't reconquering what we lost, but discovering who we really are when everything is taken from us. She lost the illusion of a perfect family, but gained something infinitely more valuable: freedom, peace, and the certainty that no one would ever again have power over her life. And you, have you gone through something similar? Have you felt the pain of being betrayed by someone who should protect you? What would you do if you were in Emily's place? Would you fight to the end or give up from exhaustion? Share your story in the comments, because we often discover we're not alone when we have the courage to speak about our wounds. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss other emotional stories that bring life lessons and make us reflect on our own choices and relationships. Each story here is a reminder that we're stronger than we imagine, and that starting over is always possible, no matter our age or the scars we carry.